Hi everyone and welcome back to my YouTube channel. So in today's video, what I want to share is some of the top misconceptions that I had about the solutions architect role at AWS before I applied. Before I applied, I had a lot of misconceptions about what the role would entail. And now, after being at the company for about 2.5 years, I thought I'd just share my experience and reflect back on some of those misconceptions, and just share what some of the realities of life at AWS really are. So the first one, and probably the biggest one for most people, will be the fact that you think you need to know everything about AWS before you join. And this is just absolute nonsense. If that was the case, there'd probably be a handful of people, if not anyone, working at AWS. The reality is that the number of services and the functionalities that they offer are so broad and so wide, it really is almost impossible to keep up with the new developments across every service. There are so many service teams working, day in, day out to build new features, to extend the functionality of their services. And in fact, if you wanted to keep up with this, it would probably be like a full-time job. In fact, if you haven't heard of Jeff Barr, he is AWS's chief evangelist, and he releases information in the form of blog posts to let people know about new service releases, what they're intended for, and how to use them. So if you haven't seen his blog, go ahead and check it out. So what I've learned is that the hiring managers aren't actually looking to see if you know AWS inside out, or even if you've used AWS or cloud before. What they're really looking for is for your potential to grow in the role and to absorb that information. That kind of skill set can't be taught. You need to bring that with you. What can be taught is how to use the AWS technology platform in order to help build things for our customers. All of that can be learned, and there's plenty of people there to help and to guide you, upskill your knowledge. So what you do need to show is a natural curiosity and a mindset that is focused towards learning. And in fact, this is one of the AWS leadership principles. It's called Learn and Be Curious. And so what you really want to show is that you may not know the answer, but you're curious and you're willing enough to go ahead and find out what the answer is. Okay, so the second misconception I had was that everyone, if not most people, will have a degree in something like computer science or some IT-related background. And that is just completely not true either. So my background is in physics. Before starting my professional life, I didn't really have any sort of background into IT or technology in that sense. And so it's been a really steep learning curve for me over the last sort of 7 to 8 years. People at AWS have all sorts of backgrounds. I know people with, loads of different types of degrees. And there are times where I really do feel like a background in computer science or just having a bit more in-depth knowledge around IT and computing would have really helped me. But I think this can be mitigated by your own learning and just getting stuck in with customer work. So don't worry if you don't have an IT background or you don't come from an IT style background. I know people who have done sort of career style changes, moving from one career field into tech, and they're doing great. So it really is more about your mentality, your willingness to adapt, your willingness to learn, and your willingness just to jump in and start talking to customers and working with them and helping them to solve their problems. And you will be able to plug those gaps that you have in your knowledge. Okay, so the third one is knowing how to code. Now this one is and isn't true. You absolutely do not need to know how to code in order to get a job at AWS. But do I think it's useful to know some basic programming languages? Absolutely. Now, just to caveat, I'm not a developer. I don't have a developer background, but I can take a look at some code, figure out what it's doing, and I can also put together some code for pretty basic functionality. I am looking to change that, however. A lot of my interactions are now increasingly with developers from the customer side. So I want to understand their pain points. I want to understand, where their challenges are. And that probably involves me learning how to code and using some of that skill set on the AWS platform. So that's something I'm looking to change currently. I have tried to learn how to code before, and it's never really worked very well. I think that's probably because I didn't really have a project or some sort of deadline I was working towards, and I had no real accountability. I didn't need to deliver something to someone. But I am going to be learning how to code, and I'm going to be recording my progress and sharing it on YouTube in a series of vlogs. So please do check those out if you're also learning to code. It's never too late to start, but we can do this together. There are some other reasons why I am learning how to code and why learning how to code is important to me. The first one is around automation. So a huge benefit of adopting the cloud, adopting AWS, is that you can leverage a lot more automation than you could before. And effectively, all automation is taking something that a human would do, some sort of repeatable activity, and translating that into code that a machine can understand and a machine can carry out. And if done correctly, if you've done the automation correctly, then it can make your life in the cloud a lot more efficient, and also it can make it a lot less prone to human error. So let's take something like infrastructure as code as an example. So infrastructure as code is where you, instead of going into the console and manually building out a server, for example, you would take the characteristics of that server and you would write that in some sort of code. So one typical example of this is Terraform. Terraform is a tool created by HashiCorp, and it allows you to describe your infrastructure, so your AWS deployment, as code. So what this means is if I had a reusable component I needed to build, so for example, I have 10 servers, or my end users constantly need servers and I need to deploy them. Instead of me manually going in and deploying them, I can build some automation that says every time that they request something, I can have infrastructure as code that gets deployed, and everything that the customer is asking for or that my end user needs can just be deployed without me having to do manual actions in the AWS console. So you can see how this can be really, really helpful in the long term. The next reason is one I just touched on slightly earlier, and this is because the cloud actually empowers developers a lot more. It puts more power into the hands of developers to go ahead and start building. And as I mentioned, a lot of my conversations are now happening with developer leads or developer engineers. And so I just want to be able to appreciate some of their pain points and make sure that I really understand where they're coming from and what they're talking about. And the final reason for me is a lot more of the kind of higher level cloud services, like working with serverless, working with API gateways, working with DynamoDB, etc. A lot of that, you're abstracting away from the infrastructure. These are serverless services. So it means you don't need to provision infrastructure. And really, if you want to start experimenting and playing with some of those services and learning more about them, then you need to have a level of knowledge around how to code so that you can then go ahead and build applications and build functionality using these services. Okay, so the fourth misconception is that you will spend all of your time doing technical work. And what I mean by technical work is building stuff in the AWS platform, or just spending time, on the actual AWS platform. So this is really not true. Now, yes, whilst it is a big part of the job role to keep your skills sharp, to continue learning, and to be a builder, it doesn't mean that you'll be doing this all the time when you're working. A lot of time is spent with your customers, talking to them about what they need, about where their challenges are, about where they want to go to next. And so you'll be doing things like account planning. You'll be doing enablement for your customers. You may be doing enablement for internal AWS users as well. So for example, if you know a service really well, you can do some training or help develop a workshop to help train other solutions architects in AWS. You may be doing workshops. So there's a whole host of things that you may be doing which actually sit outside of the AWS platform. And really, there's so much more to the role than just being technical and being hands-on in the platform. And this makes it really good in terms of being well-rounded. If you want to build up, different skill sets like communication, teamwork, presentation skills, alongside your technical ability. My fifth and final misconception was that you can only show your credibility through certifications. Now, of course, this is absolutely not true. People don't do certifications for a whole host of reasons. Either they just don't want to, they don't have the time, or there's some reason why they're not pursuing doing certifications. This does not take away from your knowledge. There's so many solutions architects I know who are highly, highly skilled, but just don't go down the certification route. It is a personal preference. It's a choice that you need to make if you want to invest the time and effort into a certification. In my case, I do find certifications pretty useful. I don't actively go ahead and say I'm going to be doing these certifications over the next 6 months. I kind of look at where the gaps are, what is it that I'm trying to learn more of, and then I'll try and find a certification which matches that. And it kind of helps me because it puts some structure in place. It helps me know what I don't know. Often there's services out there which you're not familiar with or you don't even know exist. So certifications help to kind of unearth those for you. I find it quite a useful way of learning new things. So those are some of my experiences. I hope that maybe it's cleared up some of the misconceptions maybe you've had as well. If there's any questions you do have about working at AWS, either in the solutions architect role or any other role, feel free to drop a comment down below and I'll do my best to help you and answer that question. If you do find these kind of videos useful, check out the other videos on my channel and please do consider liking and subscribing.